The Astor heiress has hated me since we were kids, but she couldn't escape her fate of marrying me. As a protest, she left me at the altar to go street racing, and after the wedding, she was shamelessly reckless, pulling every stunt imaginable. I became the laughingstock of our circle, and Chloe would watch with a vicious smirk. You asked for this. Live with it. Everyone thought I would cling to Chloe for the rest of my life, including Chloe herself. On our 5th anniversary, I handed her divorce papers. I smiled, relieved. I can finally get rid of you. That night, Chloe went insane, destroying our home with her bare hands. When I stepped onto the yacht, the party was in full swing. In the middle of the crowd, Chloe was lounging on a sofa, a pretty boy perched on her lap, his arm draped seductively around her neck. Guys and girls were holding up champagne glasses, chanting kiss, kiss, kiss. The boy's cheeks were flushed, his eyes practically smoldering as he leaned in. Chloe's eyes narrowed, her gaze flicking through the crowd. A smirk played on her lips as she said nonchalantly, "Behave. My husband's watching." The crowd turned, saw me, and immediately went quiet, murmuring awkward greetings. Ethan. The boy on Chloe's lap shot me a look, but didn't move. He just held her tighter, a cocky grin on his face. Doesn't that make it more thrilling? The energy in the room instantly picked back up, everyone waiting for the drama to unfold. Everyone knew my marriage to Chloe was a sham. Chloe's affairs were brazenly public, so the men she surrounded herself with had no reason to fear me, the so-called Mr. Astor who was a husband in name only. I ignored him and looked directly at Chloe. My voice was even. The press is all over the marina waiting for you. Are you coming back with me? A playful smirk touched Chloe's lips, but she didn't budge. Seeing this, the boy grew bolder, snuggling into her embrace and shooting me a defiant smile. Out on the water, lights flickered as a speedboat raced towards us. Long camera lenses focused in, shutters clicked, and the flashes were blinding. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. They got the shot. I could already see the storm that was waiting for me. I heard Chloe's mocking voice in my ear. "All right, Mr. Astor." She stood up abruptly, and the boy in her lap tumbled to the floor, caught completely by surprise. "Chloe," he whimpered, looking hurt. Chloe ignored him completely, walked over to me, and wrapped an arm around my waist, leaning in close. Home. I could clearly see the vicious amusement dancing in her eyes. She didn't actually care about that guy, but she had intentionally let the paparazzi get those pictures. She knew better than anyone that whenever she caused a scandal, I was the one who paid the price. And she never got tired of causing trouble. My expression remained neutral as I took her hand from my waist. "Let's go." Chloe let out a short, sharp laugh, dripping with sarcasm. I pretended not to hear it and pulled her onto our speedboat. In public, I was always the proper, gentle Mr. Astor. It was the unchangeable reality of this marriage. I didn't let go of her hand until we were back on shore and inside the car. Chloe grabbed it back, lacing her fingers through mine, her voice mocking. "Stay in character. If we're putting on a show, let's make it convincing." I frowned slightly and turned to look out the window, letting her have her way. We drove the rest of the way home like that. The moment we were inside, Chloe became even more aggressive, raising our clasped hands and pinning me against the wall. Her posture was dominant, aggressive, and I was trapped in the space she commanded. In the dim light, I could see the predatory interest in her eyes. I was exhausted. "Chloe," I said quietly, "I'm tired tonight." Before I could finish, she bit down on my collarbone, a clear punishment. Her laugh was muffled against my skin. "Mr. Astor, just fulfilling our marital duties. Try to cooperate." I had no grounds to refuse. Every time Chloe called me Mr. Astor, it was a reminder to never forget my place. These were the shackles I had willingly put on, so I had no right to complain. That's why she could always torment me so openly. Chloe went on tirelessly until the early hours of the morning, but I still woke up early out of habit. The other side of the bed was empty. We would sleep in the same bed, but never at the same time. Chloe had once said to me bluntly, "The last thing I want is to open my eyes and see your face. It would ruin my whole day." I stared blankly at the ceiling for a few minutes before reaching for my phone. I opened Twitter and, just as I expected, saw the news from last night. It was already a trending topic. The photo showed the boy on Chloe's lap, with me standing right there, watching them. The comments were a goldmine. The Astor heiress really knows how to live. She even brings her husband along to be the lookout, while she picks up cute guys. I'm crying. She's so loyal. She never forgets to bring her husband out with her. You don't see that kind of devotion anymore. To the person above, please log off. This is clearly not about love. Doesn't anyone feel bad for Ethan Miller? This picture is just heartbreaking. Hilarious. The heiress never wanted to marry him in the first place. He's the one who shamelessly latched on. He deserves this. Exactly. The man has zero self-respect. Still not divorcing her after this? Pathetic. And the funniest part is his PR team tried to brand him as this gentle, sophisticated gentleman. What a joke. Wait, are you serious? The heiress is obviously the one in the wrong here, and you're all attacking him. Let me be the voice of reason here. These dynastic marriages are complicated. We're just outsiders, so let's just enjoy the drama. The internet was having a field day. I was used to it. Just as I was about to close the app, the trending topic vanished. The Astor family's PR team was awake. When I got back from my morning run, Chloe was up. She was leaning against the kitchen island with a cup of coffee, her silk robe hanging loosely, revealing her delicate collarbones. She glanced at me, a wicked smile playing on her lips. If I'd known you had so much stamina, Mr. Astor, last night. Chloe, I cut her off, knowing nothing good would come out of her mouth. We leave in 30 minutes. The Astor family was intensely traditional. There was a standing rule that everyone, no matter how busy, had to be at the family estate every Sunday. It was an ironclad rule. Even someone as rebellious as Chloe never broke it. Oh, Chloe's eyes narrowed playfully. Well, good luck to you then. I knew exactly what she meant. I said nothing and went upstairs to get ready. On the drive over, Chloe was glued to her phone the entire time. I just stared out the window, bracing myself for the storm to come. As we pulled into the estate, Chloe put her phone away, got out of the car, and walked straight into the main house without a backward glance, not even bothering with the pretense. When I walked in, she was sprawled on the sofa, looking completely at ease. She had said something that made her grandmother beam with laughter. Grandmother, I said politely. Ethan, the matriarch nodded at me, her tone gentle. Chloe's parents are waiting for you in the study. You should go see them. Of course, I knew exactly what was coming. And Chloe, the one who had caused all of this, just sat there with a faint smile, not even bothering to look up. I walked out of the study with the fresh print of a hand on my cheek and the taste of blood in my mouth. Mrs. Astor was a woman of standards. When she struck someone, she aimed for the face. Once she was done, she reverted to her usual elegant, aristocratic self. Every word she spoke was laced with condescension. Ethan, you've disappointed me greatly. What kind of man can't even control his own wife? Instead, you enable her nonsense. Is this how it's supposed to be? My patience is wearing thin. I stood outside the study door, and I could faintly hear their conversation continuing. Mr. Astor, who had been silent the whole time, finally spoke. Why are you blaming him for what our daughter did? Who else is there to blame? His wife retorted coldly. Chloe was wild before she married him, but she was never this reckless. She continued, her voice rising. You all forced her to marry a man she doesn't love. Of course she's miserable. Mr. Astor sighed. It was father who arranged this marriage. My hands were tied. Then find a way. She's the only daughter I have left. She choked on her words. I just want her to be happy, not shackled to a man she doesn't love. I turned and walked away. As I walked down the long hallway, my thoughts suddenly drifted to Stella. The sting on my lip seemed to spread to my chest, a dull, indescribable ache. At the end of the hall, by an open window, stood Chloe. She was leaning against the frame, arms crossed, a cigarette smoldering between her fingers. The spring sunlight filtered through the trees outside, casting her face in shifting shadows. I was about to walk past without a word, but she grabbed my wrist. The hand holding the cigarette brushed against the corner of my mouth. A low scoff rumbled in her throat. TSK, so they actually hit you this time. The smoke stung my eyes, and I pushed her hand away. Chloe put the cigarette back to her lips, her narrow eyes fixed on me with a look that was somewhere between a smile and a sneer, sharp and dangerous. Ethan, don't you know how to fight back? Her low voice was laced with a lazy sort of amusement, making it impossible to read her mood. I laughed too. Do I have the right to fight back? Chloe said nothing. When the cigarette burned down to the filter, she stubbed it out in the ashtray on the windowsill. Right? She said, her voice quiet but laced with a cold viciousness. You brought this on yourself. You deserve it. She turned and left without another word. With Chloe leaving like that, I knew the Astors would blame me for it. Under the guise of marital advice, they would spend the rest of the day subtly and not so subtly putting me down. I took it all with quiet dignity. Some debts can eventually be paid off, and some people you hope to never see again in this lifetime. After leaving the Astor estate, I had the driver take me to the private care facility, as usual. Halfway there, I got a call from the facility. Mr. Astor, Mrs. Miller's condition has taken a turn for the worse. You need to come as soon as you can. I clutched my phone, my heart plummeting. I burst into her room and saw her, frail and gaunt in the bed, and my eyes immediately started to burn. What happened? I asked. She was doing so much better when I was here 2 days ago. The nurse couldn't meet my eyes. I'm so sorry, Mr. Astor. I wasn't watching closely enough. She saw the news online. For years, no matter what Chloe had just done to me, I could always put on a happy, blushing face for my mother and talk about how wonderful my wife was. I had always been a good actor. Ethan, she whispered, struggling to lift her hand. I took her hand, my voice catching in my throat. Mom, she patted my hand reassuringly, tears welling up in her clouded eyes. I regret forcing you into this. I thought you and she were childhood friends, and you loved her so much. I thought I was giving you the best possible future, but I never imagined. Just saying that much left her breathing heavily. I wiped her tears away, my voice soft. Mom, it's in the past. Let's not talk about it. The Astors never wanted this marriage, and Chloe treats you so horribly. It must be so hard for you, living with them, she said, fresh tears streaming down her face. Not at all, I said, forcing a smile. I'm an Astor now. I have fame. I have money. Life couldn't be more comfortable. She stared at me for a long time before turning her head away, as if she couldn't bear to look. Oh, Ethan, I'm so sorry. The silence in the room was suffocating. After a long moment, she asked, her voice hesitant. Could you ask Chloe to come see me? In that moment, my heart felt like it was being pricked by 1,000 needles, a dense, unstoppable pain. Okay, I said, walking to the door and pulling out my phone to call Chloe. I called again and again, but each call went unanswered, like dropping a stone into the ocean. I called her office. Her assistant told me, Ms. Astor scheduled a trip to Kenya right after she left the estate. Her plane hasn't landed yet. What is she doing there? She said, she's going on a safari. I stood there, phone in hand, in a long silence. My mother drifted in and out of consciousness. Whenever she woke, she would murmur, "Where's Chloe?" I kept calling Chloe, over and over, sending text after text. The spring nights were long, but not long enough. She didn't get to see Chloe. In the desolate early hours of that spring morning, I lost my mother forever. Thanks to my status as Mr. Astor, my family, the Millers, made sure her funeral was a grand affair. As the funeral was ending, Chloe finally called back. I didn't answer. I just let it ring again and again until it stopped. The next day, I went back to my family's house to quietly sort through my mother's things alone. After so many years of her being sick, her room had collected a thick layer of dust. She was gone, and everything she left behind felt old. In the evening, someone pushed the door open and stood there in silence for a long time. I didn't turn around. My voice was flat. Chloe, I don't want to see you right now. The person behind me didn't say anything, just stood there for another moment before leaving. I took care of all of my mother's belongings, keeping only a single, thick photo album. As I passed the living room, my family was gathered around a little girl of about 10. She looked upset, and they were all cooing over her, trying to cheer her up. When they saw me standing at the top of the stairs, their smiles faded awkwardly. My father gestured, and a woman with a pleasant face quickly led the little girl away. Ethan, he said, gesturing to the dinner table. Stay and eat with us. No, thank you. I looked at him quietly, and it felt as if all the hatred I had for him had vanished overnight. Dad, I said softly, this is the last time I'll call you that. His face immediately hardened. What did you just say? I ignored him and smiled to myself. My debt to the Miller family is paid. He was so used to me being docile and obedient that he couldn't process it. You're cutting ties with this family? Yes, I said, turning away coldly. Ethan, he bellowed, grabbing the nearest ashtray. I heard it whistling through the air behind me. My vision darkened for a second as someone pulled me into an embrace. The ashtray connected with the shoulder of the person holding me with a sickening thud. I looked up, stunned, into Chloe's dark, cold eyes. Ms. Astor, my father stammered, terrified. Chloe didn't even spare him a glance. She just grabbed my hand and strode out of the house. Back in the car, neither of us said a word. The shadows of trees flickered across the windows in the quiet darkness as Chloe pulled out a cigarette and placed it between her lips. She flicked her lighter open and closed, but never lit it. Her eyes were downcast. I'm sorry. My phone was off the whole time I was away. As far as I could remember, it was the first sincere apology I had received from her in our 5 years of marriage. Usually, her apologies were flippant and sarcastic, designed only to provoke me. The rich heiress, let loose on the plains of East Africa, indulging her wild side. A life that colorful had no room for something as mundane as death. According to the role I was supposed to play, I should have been understanding. But right now, my heart felt hollow and adrift, and I had no desire to say a single word back to her. Chloe's brow was furrowed. She finally took the unlit cigarette from her lips and crushed it in her fist, frustrated. She squeezed so hard her knuckles turned white. Ethan, can you just? Her words were cut off by the ringing of her phone. She seemed to be holding in some unplaceable anger with nowhere to direct it. She answered the phone, her voice sharp. What the hell is wrong with you? In the confined space of the car, the voice on the other end was perfectly clear, young, and vibrant. Chloe. He didn't sound the least bit intimidated. His voice rose, a mix of complaint and pouting. What was that? Leaving me all alone in Kenya? Chloe's eyebrows shot up in annoyance. It means you got what you deserved. Chloe, you're heartless, the boy complained. I don't care. You have to come get me. In your dreams, Chloe scoffed. Just you try and make me find my own way back, he pressed on. I'll go straight to your husband. You'll regret it. At that, Chloe's eyes narrowed slowly, but a smile played on her lips, giving her face a chilling look. Her voice was casual when she replied, fine. The boy on the other end seemed taken aback, his bravado faltering. I'm not trying to threaten you. Just then, Chloe pushed open her car door, stepped out, and tucked the phone against her shoulder as she finally lit her cigarette. Her voice grew distant, and a breeze blew in through the slightly open window. My assistant Mark called. Mr. Miller, Ms. Astor is trending on Twitter again. Chloe's phone call explained everything. She had spent the last couple of weeks in Kenya with him. It was no surprise that a new scandal was breaking. I opened Twitter. The first thing I saw was a photo of Chloe posing with a hunting rifle, a handsome, wild-looking young man's hands over hers on the barrel, the two of them standing intimately close. I recognized the boy in the photo. Leo. He was from the Lower East Side, brash and fiery, with a wild energy. He and Chloe were two of a kind. I'd met him twice before. The first time was in London. I had flown all the way there to see her. One night, Chloe, drunk, had casually pinned me against the floor-to-ceiling window. Do you even know how to kiss? She'd asked with a wicked grin, her voice a low temptation. Relax. Open your mouth. My clumsy resistance must have looked like some kind of invitation to her. The look in Chloe's eyes darkened, and her kiss became hungry, spiraling out of control. Just as the moment was about to ignite, a boy with an earring and a leather jacket burst into the room. His voice cracked. Chloe, what are you doing? Chloe didn't seem annoyed by the interruption at all. She just laughed, teaching my fiancé how to kiss. The boy looked from me to Chloe and back again. Like a wounded animal, he grabbed a bottle of whiskey from the bar and threw it to the floor. He glared at Chloe, his eyes red-rimmed. You're an asshole, he spat, before storming out and slamming the door. The entire time, Chloe just watched like a spectator, calmly lighting a cigarette as if it were all a show for her amusement. The drama was over as quickly as it had begun, and the room fell silent. A strange thought crossed my mind. He had a key to Chloe's apartment. The feeling of her kiss still lingered on my lips. Do you love him? I asked. Chloe tilted her head, a smirk on her face. Trying to control me now? I pressed my lips together, unsure of what to say. Seeing my discomfort, her smile widened. Ethan, you can't be too greedy. To Chloe, our relationship was nothing more than a business contract, devoid of any real emotion. For me to expect both the benefits of being Mr. Astor and her emotional fidelity was, in her eyes, far too greedy. I lowered my head and said nothing. The second time I saw Leo was at my wedding to Chloe. That day, Chloe abandoned me in a room full of guests, walking right out of the reception. I ran after her, trying to get her to stay. A flashy convoy of luxury sports cars, filled with her heiress friends, was waiting for her at the entrance. Chloe shrugged off her tuxedo jacket, ripped off the bow tie, and tossed them at me. A cruel smile played on her lips. Congratulations, Mr. Astor. She swung a leg over a motorcycle, and its engine roared to life, echoing down the street. Leo, sitting behind her, gave me a mock salute and a dazzling smile. See you around, Ethan. I stood there in the warm spring sun, watching them speed away. The back of Leo's jacket billowed in the wind. Leo had been chasing her for years. His devotion was undeniable. Scandals involving the Astor heiress were nothing new. But to take a boy on a safari in Kenya during her own mother-in-law's funeral, it was a new level of heartless. I watched in silence, my heart feeling cold and clear. The car door opened and closed. A faint scent of bergamot from her perfume cut through the lingering smell of smoke she brought back with her. I didn't look up, but I couldn't ignore her intense gaze on me. After that phone call, whatever strange anger Chloe had been feeling seemed to have subsided. She spoke as if nothing was wrong. Come with me to the cemetery tomorrow. My finger paused on my phone screen. There's no need. Chloe's voice had a teasing lilt. Are you angry? I looked up and met her searching gaze. She was trying to find a crack in my calm expression. I just don't think it's necessary, I said, turning off my phone. What's missed is missed. The moment has passed. No amount of making up for it will change anything. Chloe's eyes narrowed. And what if I say it is necessary? She was pushing it, which I hadn't expected. Chloe was usually too cynical to care this much about anything. I pressed my lips together. Whatever you want. No one could ever stop her from doing what she wanted. We arrived at the cemetery the next day. As I reached for my seatbelt, Chloe stopped my hand. I'll go alone. Watching her solitary figure disappear among the gravestones, I thought about how hard Chloe was to understand sometimes. A phone started ringing unexpectedly. Chloe had left her phone on the center console. I glanced at the screen. It was Leo. No one answered, but he kept calling, again and again, the ringtone filling the car. Annoyed, I put on my headphones and closed my eyes. I didn't notice Chloe getting back into the car. Her cool fingertips brushed against my ear. I opened my eyes to see Chloe taking off my headphones. Your phone was ringing for a while, I explained instinctively. Oh, she said, her eyes lowered, her long fingers toying with the earbuds. Something was off about her mood, so I didn't say anything. The car fell silent. Chloe pulled out her cigarettes, tapping one out and placing it between her lips. She rolled down the window, turning her head to light it. I remember when we were kids, I used to always go to your house for noodles. I shot her a quick glance. It was strange. The great Astor heiress actually remembered a simple bowl of noodles. I thought of my mother and replied quietly, yes. You used to eat 3 bowls at a time. Chloe raised an eyebrow in mock disgust. Unlike you, Mr. Picky Eater, who would have about 2 noodles and call it a meal. I pursed my lips, unable to argue. Back then, my mom wasn't much of a cook. The only thing she could make well was a simple bowl of scallion noodles. I'd eaten it my whole life and was sick of it. Every time we sat down to eat, I'd pray for anything but noodles. But Chloe tried them once and praised my mom's cooking to the skies. My mom was so thrilled that she invited Chloe to come over for dinner whenever she wanted. And Chloe took her up on it, coming over all the time. Scallion noodles became a permanent fixture on our menu. I was so miserable I could barely eat. Chloe reached out the window and flicked the ash from her cigarette. Her voice held a trace of regret. I guess I won't be able to have them anymore. A wave of grief for my mother washed over me, and I turned to look out the window, unable to speak. It had been a long time since Chloe and I had shared a moment so peaceful. Maybe it was because she had missed my mother's funeral, but for a moment, Chloe had set aside her usual cynicism. The phone on the console rang again, shattering the rare moment of peace. Chloe sat up, put the phone to her ear, and started the car, steering with one hand. As soon as the car started moving, the boy's clear voice came through the car's speakers. He sounded angry, his question blunt. Chloe, where the hell have you been? Chloe's phone was connected to the car's Bluetooth. She must have forgotten to switch it to private mode. It was Leo. I knew it. She made no move to hide it from me. Where are you? She asked, her voice lazy. He gave her the name of a hotel, his tone shifting to a pout. I just flew for over 10 hours. I'm dead tired. So Leo was back in the States. I put my headphones back on and turned the volume all the way up. The call ended quickly. Chloe glanced at me in the rearview mirror, her lips moving slightly. I read her lips. She was asking home. Yeah, I answered, closing my eyes. Chloe slammed on the accelerator, and the car shot forward. Caught by surprise, my body was thrown forward, and my eyes flew open. In the rearview mirror, I could see her face, focused on the road, a wicked little smile playing on her lips. That bitch. She dropped me at the door, then spun the car around and sped off down the road. I stood there for a moment before turning to go inside. In the days that followed, I quietly mourned my mother. But in the silence of the night, the grief would creep in, insidious and all-encompassing. Before, even though my mother was sick and living in the facility, I still felt like I had a place to go. Now, I looked around and felt like I had no home at all. This house, luxurious and empty, was nothing more than a gilded cage. My internal clock, honed over years, woke me at 6 a.m. sharp. I must have cried in my sleep, because my face felt tight with dried tears. I lay there for a moment, collecting myself, then got out of bed. I saw a figure standing by the window downstairs and paused on the staircase. The early morning light was just breaking, cut into shifting patterns by the trees outside, casting her in light and shadow. She had just woken up and was still in her pajamas. That look on your face, Chloe said, turning her head toward me, is very interesting. I walked over to the counter and poured a glass of water. I didn't think you were coming home last night, I said calmly. I was genuinely surprised to see her. Didn't she need to stay at the hotel with someone? A playful smirk touched Chloe's lips. What's the matter, Mr. Astor? Planning on catching me in the act? I had just taken a sip of water and nearly choked. In the past, as long as Chloe didn't cross certain lines, I wouldn't interfere with her recklessness. But she had a talent for making trouble, and her scandals were constantly splashed across the tabloids. And just as she wanted, I, Mr. Astor, became a laughingstock. She was the one being reckless, but it was always me who had to answer to the Astor family. I knew she hated it when I had to track her down in some club or bar. But what choice did I have? As long as I was Mr. Astor, it was my job to clean up her messes. That wasn't the plan. I swallowed, the water doing little to wash away the bitter taste in my mouth. Just be discreet, I reminded her. Try not to get caught. Chloe squinted at me through a plume of smoke. Sorry, I was born for the spotlight. I had nothing left to say. I finished my water and went out for my morning run, just like any other day. After my run, I showered and got dressed. I met Chloe in the garage as she was leaving for work. She frowned slightly. Ethan, the company offers bereavement leave, you know. I know, I nodded. 2 weeks. It ends today. Chloe looked me over, her expression unreadable. She suddenly leaned in, resting a hand on my shoulder, the back of her fingers grazing my neck. It sent a shiver down my spine. I moved her hand away. We're going to be late. A lazy smile spread across Chloe's face. The Astor family must have done something right in a past life to deserve a son-in-law like you. I ignored her sarcasm, got in my car, and pulled out of the garage. A moment later, a blue sports car roared past me. Chloe, her elbow resting on the open window, disappeared into the flow of traffic. I gripped the steering wheel, my brow furrowing. Did she think the public roads were her personal racetrack? With 2 weeks of work piled up, I dove straight into a mountain of paperwork the moment I got to the office. My assistant, Mark, poked his head in. Mr. Miller, Ms. Astor wants to see you in her office. I had a feeling this wasn't going to be good. I had braced myself, but I still felt a sense of unease as I pushed open her office door. Chloe was lounging in her chair. Sitting on the edge of her massive desk, swinging his legs, was a young man. He was facing her, so I couldn't see his face. But from the stylish, bold clothes, I had a pretty good idea it was Leo. I looked at Chloe. Ms. Astor, you wanted to see me? Chloe gestured towards me with her chin, an eyebrow raised. There he is, my husband. The tone of her voice gave me an instant headache. Here comes trouble. I couldn't believe Leo had actually followed through on his threat and come here. Leo turned around and gave me a brazen, head-to-toe once-over. Ethan, we meet again, he said with a bright, cocky smile, not looking the least bit embarrassed. He acted as if Chloe were his wife, not mine. I almost laughed. I used to see him and think, with a pang in my chest, that Chloe treated him differently than all the others. But seeing him now, I realized he was no different from any of the other men in her life. It was me who had changed. Hello, I replied politely. He swiveled around smoothly, propping his chin on his hands. It's been, what, less than 5 years? And you're already looking like a top executive. He winked. Vice President Miller, I hear. The implication that I had slept my way to the top was clear. I smiled slightly. I had connections. My calm admission seemed to throw him off. A low chuckle rumbled in Chloe's throat. She leaned to one side, resting her cheek on her hand, and gave me a look of genuine appreciation. I lowered my eyes. Chloe, Leo whined. I want to work here too. I can use my connections. Chloe gave a lazy smile. You're not Mr. Astor. Leo was speechless for a second. Whose side are you on? Chloe just laughed her devil-may-care laugh and didn't answer. Chloe, that's enough, she said, slowly taking out a cigarette. You, with your bars at night, sleep all day schedule? You want a job? Leo pouted. I could just come home earlier. Why don't you just sleep at the bar? You're making fun of me. They went back and forth, bickering as if I wasn't even in the room. I cleared my throat. Ms. Astor, if there's nothing else, I'll get back to work. Chloe gave me a long, meaningful look. Fine. I turned to leave, but Leo called out. Hey, wait a second. When I didn't stop, he hopped off the desk and followed me out. Ethan, his voice, laced with a smile, trailed after me. I turned slightly. Is there something else? He wanted to cause a scene, and Chloe had indulged him, even calling me to her office for him. What more could he want? Not much, Leo said, a wide grin spreading across his face. I just wanted to let you know that Chloe was with me in Kenya. I had to admit, his phrasing sounded familiar. One day, not long after Chloe and I were married, I received a text from an international number. The message was brief. It was just one line. I was the one with her for her 4 years in London. Who the hell are you? But I stared at it for a very long time, reading it over and over. So much time has passed, it's hard to remember what I was thinking then. I only remember the feeling of my heart being twisted like a knife. I never replied. But now, I felt surprisingly calm. Who was I? Her childhood friend? Her husband by arrangement? I nodded coolly. Yes, I know. You're taking this well, right? He said, as if he were an expert. It's a dynastic marriage, after all. It's all about business. Who would be stupid enough to catch real feelings? His meaning was perfectly clear. I was just a pawn in a business deal. He and Chloe were the real love story. In this day and age, where people say the one who isn't loved is the real third wheel, I was here first, but somehow I had become the third wheel in their relationship. I guess I was the one in the wrong. I couldn't help but smile. You're right. The smile on Leo's face faltered. He had tried his best to get under my skin, but it was like punching a pillow. He was clearly frustrated. I didn't give him another thought and went back to my work. On Saturday morning, Chloe still hadn't come home. I sent Chloe a text. The estate. 10 o'clock. Be there. We couldn't pretend to be a loving couple, but we could at least arrive at the same time. As usual, Chloe didn't reply, but I knew she would be there. I arrived right on time. A few minutes later, Chloe's car came roaring up the driveway. In the passenger seat was Leo, dressed not in his usual flashy style, but in a tailored suit. As the car passed me, he waved. Morning, Ethan. I couldn't believe Chloe was being so reckless, so brazenly bringing him to her family's home. After her grandfather died, the rest of the Astors had mostly given up on trying to control Chloe's behavior, choosing to turn a blind eye. But the family prided themselves on their reputation. They would never tolerate one of her lovers showing up on their doorstep. Chloe got out of the car and strode into the house. I followed at a measured pace. Behind me, Leo was juggling several gift boxes as he hurried to catch up. Ethan, what do you think? Will Chloe's family like these gifts? I had no desire to engage with him and kept walking, but he was persistent. I hear her parents don't like you very much. Do you think they'll like me? That made me pause. I looked him over, from head to toe. Leo stood there, smiling, waiting for my answer. I gave a small, faint smile, said nothing, and started walking again. He seemed to take that as a challenge. Not wanting to be outdone, he hurried past me and entered the house first. Mrs. Astor, a shawl draped over her shoulders, was just then descending the stairs. She saw Leo and me walk in, one after the other, and then her eyes fell on Chloe, who was lounging on the sofa, idly toying with a teacup. It didn't take a genius to figure out what was happening. I lowered my eyes, staying quiet, acting as if it had nothing to do with me. Leo put on his most charming smile. Mrs. Astor, I'm Leo. It's a pleasure to meet you. I brought a small gift for you, I hope. It certainly is small. Mrs. Astor cut him off, her voice cold. The smile froze on Leo's face. This is a family gathering. We are not entertaining guests, Mrs. Astor said, then looked at the butler. Please show him out. Yes, madam. The butler gestured towards the door. Mr. Leo, this way, please. Leo clearly hadn't expected this. He stood there, flustered and embarrassed, his face turning red then pale. He looked pleadingly at Chloe. Chloe just sat there, legs spread wide in a careless slouch, spinning the teacup in her fingers, not even bothering to look up. For a moment, I actually felt a little sorry for Leo. With someone as fickle as Chloe, her affection was like a reflection in a mirror, beautiful, but untouchable and unreal. It was captivating, but you could never take it seriously. When Leo left, there were tears of humiliation in his eyes. His presence did nothing to disturb the atmosphere of the family dinner. Only the grandmother, the matriarch, lightly tapped Chloe's arm with her cane. You need to behave yourself, she said. Don't bring unsavory characters into this house. It's upsetting. Chloe leaned back, her voice dripping with false innocence. You've got it all wrong, grandmother. Even if he insisted on coming, you couldn't have stopped him? Honestly, no, Chloe said with a cynical smirk. I can't exactly get physical with him, can I? Her grandmother, unable to win the argument, just shot her a glare. Then she turned to me, her expression softening, and beckoned me over. Ethan, come sit next to me. Perhaps because Chloe had truly gone too far this time, her grandmother spent a long time saying kind, comforting things to me. I listened humbly, playing the part of the dutiful grandson-in-law. After she finished with me, she turned to Chloe, her tone shifting. You need to settle down. You've been married for almost 5 years, and there's still no talk of children. The way you say that, Chloe began, her voice full of her usual flippancy. You make it sound as if I could have a baby all by myself if I just settled down. My jaw tightened. Just then, Chloe shot me a look, playful and challenging. Before her grandmother could turn her attention to me, I quietly stood up. Grandmother, excuse me for a moment. I took my time before heading back to the living room. The thick carpet muffled my footsteps. Her grandmother was still talking to Chloe. Ethan is a good man. You should stop tormenting him. Chloe drawled mockingly. A good man deserves a good woman. It's a waste for him to be married to me. I'm glad you realize that, her grandmother retorted. If you push him too far and freeze his heart, you'll find yourself without a husband. Chloe, looking bored, grabbed her cigarettes from the table and headed outside. I sat back down next to her grandmother, pretending I hadn't heard a thing. We all stayed until evening, leaving when it was time for the matriarch to rest. I had driven myself, so I left on my own, not waiting for Chloe. A little way down the road, I saw Chloe's car in my rearview mirror. This time, she didn't speed past me. She followed me patiently, all the way back to the house. There was no need to speak, so I went straight upstairs to shower. As I came out of the bathroom, drying my hair, I was startled to see Chloe leaning against the wall. The bedroom lights were off. The only light came from the bathroom's frosted glass door, casting her in dim, hazy light. Her robe was slightly open, revealing the elegant line of her collarbone. I stood there in silence. What was wrong with her, just standing there in the dark, listening to me shower? All clean, Chloe asked, an eyebrow raised, a hungry look in her eyes. My grip on the towel tightened. What do you want? At my question, a low laugh rumbled in her throat. She reached out, her hand curling around the back of my neck, and leaned in close, her eyes locked on mine. What do you think? I looked away and said nothing. Her fingers moved to my collar, toying with the fabric. You heard her today. Her warm breath was on my neck as she whispered, a wicked smile in her voice. Grandmother said she wants a grandchild. A deep, familiar revulsion clawed its way up my throat, and I grabbed her hand, stopping her. Chloe, that's enough. Chloe had always used marital duties as her excuse, and it had always worked. My cold, firm rejection seemed to surprise her, and she stopped. She pulled away, looking down at me, her gaze intense. After a long moment, she scoffed. So, Ethan, you're done with the act? I pressed my lips together and answered honestly. Yes, I'm done pretending. She narrowed her eyes, the amusement draining from her face, replaced by an icy chill. We stood there in a silent standoff. The tension in the room was about to snap. Suddenly, Chloe spun around and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. A drop of water from my wet hair rolled down my hand as I heard the roar of her sports car starting up downstairs. Chloe was gone. I silently walked out onto the balcony. This three-story mansion, a lavish wedding gift from Chloe's grandfather. It was in the best location on the river, with a perfect view from this very balcony. I stood there watching, just as I had for more than 1,800 nights. I let the night air dry my hair. The Riverside Highway was long and quiet, its lights stretching out into the darkness. Her car was a streak of light in the darkness, racing away. One thought came to mind. What an eyesore. I knew Chloe. When she was upset, she had to find a way to blow off steam. Like at our wedding, when she left me at the altar to go street racing. She drove like a maniac that day, with a complete disregard for her own life. She scared her friends so much that they called her father. Her father had to go and drag her back himself. Back then, her grandfather was still alive, and he did not tolerate her behavior. He beat her so severely that no one in the family dared to intervene. But Chloe was stubborn. She knelt there, her back ramrod straight, and didn't make a sound. She refused to back down. In the end, I was the one who shielded her with my own body, taking the blows from her grandfather's cane. The old man couldn't stop his swing in time, and the cane landed squarely on my shoulder. I grunted in pain and looked up to meet Chloe's dark, furious eyes. Ethan, get the hell off me, she'd snarled. The roar of the engine faded and then returned from a different direction. Chloe had blown off her steam. The car was now parked on the shoulder of the Riverside Highway. I squinted, and I could just make out her figure standing next to the car. The darkness outlined her silhouette as she stood there in the quiet, lighting a cigarette. The flame flared and died, leaving just the red glow at her fingertips. For years, I had watched her walk away from me, my heart filled with 1,000 different emotions. But looking at her now, I felt nothing at all, just an emptiness. Even the resentment I felt towards her over my mother's death had vanished. Finally, there was nothing left. March 28th, a good day to get married. It was mine and Chloe's wedding anniversary. In our world, a marriage like ours was less a union and more a glamorous, ongoing social event. Every year, the Astors would throw a lavish party to celebrate. Chloe and I would play the part of the happy couple, creating perfect, fairy tale moments for the cameras. Everyone knew that the Astor heiress's marriage was held together by the Astor Corporation's PR department. Our entire happy marriage was a carefully constructed illusion, courtesy of them. The public would read the gossip about Chloe's latest affair one day, and then be force-fed photos of our perfect, happy marriage the next. It must have been hard to swallow. A few days before our 5th anniversary, the event planning team from Astor Corp called me. Mr. Astor. The man's voice on the other end was formal and precise. The arrangements for your and Ms. Astor's 5th anniversary celebration are all set. The itinerary has been sent to your email. I listened without saying anything. The gift you'll be presenting to Ms. Astor will be delivered to you beforehand. I finally understood what Chloe had always said. This marriage was a performance from start to finish, and Chloe and I were just the lead actors. A smile touched my lips. That won't be necessary. I'll be choosing the gift myself this year. Well, he hesitated, but ultimately agreed. Just before we hung up, he added, you and Ms. Astor are truly in sync. She also said she would be choosing her own gift for you this year. Great minds think alike. I smiled to myself. It was almost funny. When it came to these anniversary parties, Chloe was always surprisingly cooperative. Under the flashing lights of the cameras, she would make small, intimate gestures, looking at me with a tenderness that was a world away from the wild woman in the tabloid photos. But when we would embrace for the cameras, her lips would brush against my neck, a deliberate, teasing touch. Her voice would be a low, mocking whisper in my ear. Good performance, Mr. Astor. I would keep my smile in place, the devotion in my eyes looking real enough in the flash. And how do you know it's all an act? Tisk, she'd say, pulling me into a tighter, almost cruel embrace. I can hear your heart breaking much more clearly than I can see the love in your eyes. My body would go rigid, and she would squeeze just a little harder. As the cameras flashed around us, we were like two caged animals, silently tearing each other apart. There was one name we could never escape. Stella. The party started at 8. Mark, my assistant, arrived with the designated styling team. The look of an Astor's son-in-law had to be perfect. I had no say in the matter. When I came downstairs, Chloe was already waiting. She was leaning against the car, idly spinning her phone in her hand, looking effortlessly cool even in a perfectly tailored suit. She looked up at the sound of my footsteps, her eyes resting on me for a moment, but she said nothing. We hadn't seen each other since that night in the bedroom. We'd passed each other at the office, exchanging polite, cool greetings. We had settled into a strange, unspoken truce. Let's go, I said, my voice even, as I got into the car. The silence in the car was thick. When we got out of the car, I naturally took Chloe's arm. She glanced at me, seemingly surprised by my calm demeanor. I looked towards the entrance and put on my best smile. The main characters should enter arm in arm, right? Chloe suddenly tightened her grip, lacing her fingers through mine. She squeezed, pressing our palms together. I slowly looked up and met her dark, intense gaze. Chloe, everyone is waiting. The 5th anniversary party was more extravagant than any of the previous ones. With Chloe on my arm, I moved through the crowd, greeting guests with flawless, graceful composure. The cake was rolled out, and the entertainment reached its peak. Unlike previous years, Chloe's gift wasn't some piece of extravagant jewelry picked out by her team. Those pieces were always impressive, their price tags and brilliance enough to capture anyone's attention. This year, her gift was a simple, unadorned violin, but I could tell at a glance that it was something special. It was an antique, beautifully preserved, the kind of rare instrument that collectors dream of. She must have gone to a lot of trouble to find it. So, she remembered my childhood dream after all. I ran my fingers over the strings. I haven't played in a long time. I'm afraid I wouldn't do an instrument like this justice. Chloe looked at me, her voice low and meaningful. It's not too late. It was too late. I answered silently, my expression unchanging. I took a gift box from an attendant and handed it to Chloe. This year's gift, I picked it out myself. I had picked out everything myself, right down to the box, which I'd tied with a big, festive red bow. Very festive. Chloe looked down at the box for a few seconds. Then, as if sensing something, she started to open it right there. I stood on my toes and wrapped my arms around her neck, pulling her into a hug. Just like every other anniversary, we embraced, whispering to each other with smiles on our faces. I wouldn't open that now if I were you, I whispered. Chloe's body went stiff. My breath was warm against her ear. Ms. Astor, the show is over. The moment the words left my lips, it felt as if a great weight, a shadow I had carried for years, was finally lifted. In that moment, I was no longer the son of the Miller family, no longer a son-in-law to the Astors, and no longer Chloe's husband. I was just Ethan. Her free hand, which had been hanging at her side, suddenly gripped my waist. I smiled, a genuine, relieved smile. Chloe, I can finally let you go. The party was still in full swing, but Chloe was nowhere to be seen. The leading roles had been played to perfection. It was time for my exit. I've always been one to see things through to the end. We were married on this date, so we should be divorced on it too. 5 years. Exactly. Not a day more, not a day less. Mark was driving, and he kept glancing in the rearview mirror. Ms. Astor's car is right behind us. I didn't even have the urge to look back. Ignore her. The traffic is heavy. If she keeps driving like that, Mark said, his voice laced with worry. Let her. I had just stepped through the front door when I heard the roar of her engine and the screech of tires tearing through the night. Chloe grabbed my wrist from behind. Her grip was so tight it felt like my bones were grinding together. I didn't struggle. I just endured the pain. Her usual flippant tone was gone, replaced by a terrifying calm. Is it real? It was the calm before a violent storm. Are you asking about what I said, or about the papers? I asked, my back still to her. I answered my own question. It's all real. The pressure on my wrist slowly eased as she let go. The air grew thick with a suffocating silence. After a few moments, Chloe let out a cold, dismissive laugh. Her voice was relaxed, but icy. Ethan, what right do you have to divorce me? I turned to look at her, but said nothing. If she said I had no right, then I had no right. The house was dark, save for the cool moonlight filtering through a nearby window. Chloe stood there, a straight, dark silhouette, shattering the patch of moonlight on the floor. She was clearly furious, but her eyes still held that familiar, dismissive mockery. Ethan, you married me because you were forced to, because you had a debt to pay. It was never about me, was it? For all these years, you've been paying your family's debts and atoning for your sins to mine. You've been the perfect, submissive husband, never fighting back. And now that your debts are paid and your penance is done, you think you can just kick me to the curb? She let out a low laugh, as if I had just told the funniest joke in the world. I blinked. I almost wanted to laugh, too. Chloe's smile vanished. Her eyes downcast, she began to slowly tear the divorce papers she had been clutching in her hand. She didn't seem to be using much force, but her knuckles were white. I let her tear them up. I didn't try to stop her. My silence seemed to infuriate her even more. She suddenly threw the pieces into the air, and they rained down on me like confetti, the sharp edges of the paper stinging my face. I stood perfectly still and took it. A cold, chilling smile spread across Chloe's lips. Ethan, don't even think about it. She finally unleashed her full fury as she was leaving. She kicked the front door so hard it slammed against the wall with a deafening crash. And then she was gone. Mark was standing outside, clutching the violin case, trembling. Come in, I said, brushing the paper fragments from my clothes. Ms. Astor, Mark had never seen her like that before. He was terrified. It's fine. She won't be back tonight, I reassured him, gesturing to the bar. Help yourself to a drink. I'm just going to pack a few things. Wait for me here. Okay. I took the violin case from him and went upstairs. I gathered the few things I wanted to take with me. As I picked up the photo album my mother had left me, a picture fell out from between the pages. I picked it up and stared at it, lost in thought. The photo was from when I was 5 years old. I was wearing a little white suit, smiling so wide my eyes were crescents. On either side of me stood 2 little girls. They were identical, carved from the same mold, but their auras were completely different. One was gentle and reserved, smiling quietly for the camera. The other was cool and defiant, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. One was Stella, and the other was Chloe. I stared at the photo for a long time, and thinking back on Chloe's words, I felt like I could see the cruel hand of fate at work. For as long as I can remember, Chloe has hated me. My grandfather and old Mr. Astor served in the war together. The story goes that my grandfather saved his life. Because of that, the bond between the Miller and Astor families was unbreakable. When we were children, our grandfathers decided to arrange a marriage between us. With Stella and Chloe being twins, they couldn't decide which one. Old Mr. Astor teased me. Ethan, which one of the girls do you like? Pick one, and Grandpa will give her to you. I was just a little kid, looking at 2 identical girls, completely stumped. After a long moment, I planted a kiss right on Chloe's cheek. Her face turned bright red, and she furiously wiped the spot I had kissed. You little creep, she muttered. I felt hurt. I pointed to her cheek. Does it still hurt? I had kissed her because I saw a scratch on her face. Whenever I got hurt, my parents would kiss it to make it better, so I was just copying them. Chloe was not impressed. Mind your own business. Then she added fiercely, and I'm not a boy. I burst into tears and ran to my mother, while all the adults roared with laughter. And just like that, the engagement was set. As they put it, we were clearly a case of childhood rivals. And as the old saying goes, opposites attract. We were, in their eyes, a perfect match. As it turned out, they were only half right. Chloe and I were definitely rivals, but we were never a match. Chloe was the neighborhood ringleader growing up, always leading a pack of kids our age, raising hell all over the place. She was always teasing me. She'd roll around in the mud herself, then make sure to throw a clump of it onto my dress pants. I'd pout, on the verge of tears, and she would just laugh her head off. The little tomboy was so filthy you could barely make out her features, and when she grinned, all you could see was a not quite complete set of teeth. Stella was completely different from her. She was afraid I'd be upset, so she'd coax me in a soft voice and take me home to change my clothes. In kindergarten, I always had candy in my pockets. When I gave some to Stella, her face would light up. When I gave some to Chloe, she'd snort disdainfully, "I don't want your stupid candy." In elementary school, I got lazy and copied Stella's homework, and Chloe ratted me out to the teacher without a second thought. I had to stand in the corner as punishment, and as she walked past me, she gloated with a smirk, "Serves you right." In middle school, I stood on the sidelines of the field shouting with all my might, "Go, Stella, you can do it." On a scorching summer day, Chloe ran over from the field, sweat pouring down her face. She glared at me fiercely. "Ethan, shut your mouth. You're so damn loud." I was so scared that I swallowed the "Go, Chloe." I was about to shout. In high school, when teenage hearts started to flutter, guys would beg me to pass love letters to Chloe for them. It always put me in a difficult position. I don't know when it started, but I realized that whenever someone gave Chloe a love letter, I'd get really upset. Besides, ever since we were kids, the adults had always told me that I was going to marry Chloe when I grew up. So, I developed a possessive belief that Chloe wasn't allowed to accept love letters from anyone else. Stella, seeing how I felt, would kindly turn them down for me. Chloe and Ethan are basically engaged, so it wouldn't be right. From then on, the news that Chloe was Ethan's girl spread all over campus. Chloe was furious, running a finger over her thick eyebrow in irritation. "Ethan, you've really outdone yourself." From that day on, in retaliation, whenever someone gave me a love letter, Chloe would throw it in the trash right in front of them. No one dared to give me a love letter after that. In her words, "If my love life is ruined, you can forget about having one too." After that incident, Chloe seemed to find me even more irritating. For a while, I was really down about it. I asked Stella, "Does Chloe not like me?" Stella smiled gently. "Why do you ask that? If she doesn't like me, then I won't marry her in the future." I learned early on that marrying someone who doesn't love you truly turns a marriage into a tomb. They have their own world. While you're trapped in that tomb, your entire life a complete and utter tragedy. Just like my parents. Stella was silent for a long time before asking, "Do you really like Chloe that much?" I nodded. "What do you like about her?" I couldn't answer. The crushes of youth are always so inexplicable. If the gentle and refined Stella was a soft spring rain that nurtures everything silently, then the wild and untamable Chloe was a fierce, passionate wind sweeping across an open field. I wanted to be in that field, chasing that fierce wind. When I didn't say anything for a long time, Stella lowered her gaze and said, "Ethan, she likes you too." After a pause, she added with a smile, "She's just a big kid, really." Huh. My eyes widened in confusion. If she likes me, why does she always pick on me? I couldn't quite understand how a girl's affection worked. The young Stella's gaze fell upon her open book. Everyone shows they like someone in different ways. I always believed everything Stella told me without question. My young heart couldn't help but flutter. One night, during a party at the Waltons' house, I quietly slipped away from the adults and knocked on Chloe's window. She was naturally a free spirit and hated appearing at these kinds of parties to listen to the adults drone on. That day, she slid open her window, engrossed in a heated video game, and said without even looking up, "Don't bother me." "Chloe, do you like me?" Chloe's hand jerked so dramatically that her phone fell to the floor, the screen flashing game over. I looked at her with a grin. "Why are you blushing?" "Ethan," Chloe said through gritted teeth, "aren't you supposed to be a guy?" "I am." "Then act like one, for God's sake." I blinked. "You answer me first." Chloe lost her patience, stiffened her neck, and scoffed. "In your dreams. No one likes you." With a slam, she shut the window. I was completely heartbroken. I buried my face in my blanket and cried my eyes out. The love and hate of youth are always so earth-shattering. I was mad at Chloe for that entire summer. The day our SAT scores came out, Stella got her acceptance letter from Harvard. My scores were decent, but thanks to extra points from my violin awards, I also got into a school I was happy with, NYU. As for Chloe, she got a beating from her grandfather, Mr. Walton Sr., to reward Stella. Mr. Walton Sr. generously arranged for a car to take our whole group of childhood friends to a vacation cabin in the Catskills. Without any supervision, we all went completely wild. I had a drink for the first time. It tasted awful. I choked so hard my face scrunched up and my eyes started to water. Chloe raised an eyebrow and said sarcastically, "Look at you. Can't even handle that. And you're trying to drink. None of your business." Believe me, I couldn't care less. Arguing with Chloe just made my mood worse. Out of spite, I drank a lot more. Unsurprisingly, I got completely wasted and passed out amidst a crowd of my friends dancing wildly to deafening music. When the earthquake hit, I just thought my head was spinning. Everything happened so fast. The world was shaking. with the deafening sound of cracking concrete and steel. Screams were incessant, and everything descended into chaos. I didn't even have time to react when Stella threw herself over me. I only caught a glimpse of a roof beam collapsing and crashing down on her slender shoulders and back. I don't know how much time passed before I woke up from unconsciousness to complete, overwhelming darkness. I felt pain all over my body, but I couldn't pinpoint where it was coming from. I tried to move, but found I was pinned down and couldn't budge. It wasn't concrete and steel, but the fading warmth of a girl's body. Stella, I couldn't move, and tears streamed down my face. For the first time, I felt the presence of death so intensely. A warm, sticky liquid dripped onto my neck, and I could feel Stella's shallow breaths against the top of my head. Ethan, don't cry. Stella's voice was faint. You're bleeding so much. I cried even harder, terrified she was going to die. I could feel she was in immense pain. Her body was trembling uncontrollably, but she still tried to comfort me with a smile. Don't be afraid. Chloe will come and save us. She said that Chloe was the only one not in the cabin when the earthquake hit, so she would definitely come for us. Chloe became our single spark of hope in the despair. We clung to that hope, facing death in the darkness. Stella said we couldn't fall asleep, so we talked and talked. By the end, I couldn't remember what we had talked about. I only remember her voice growing weaker and weaker at the end. It was like a series of murmurs. From now on, you have to get along with Chloe. I won't be there to pass messages between you anymore. Ethan, I'm sorry. If only you had chosen me. Stella didn't make it until Chloe arrived with help. Of the people buried that day, more than half survived, but Stella wasn't among them. The rescue was still underway. Everything around me was a blur, and my consciousness was so heavy I couldn't even feel pain anymore. I could faintly hear many people talking, and above it all, Chloe's long, agonizing cries. A young woman's grief was like a landslide, a tidal wave. I think Chloe cried a lifetime's worth of tears that day. For years after, she was as wild and flamboyant as ever, but her eyes never turned red from crying again. I was in a coma at the hospital for a long time and missed Stella's funeral. Chloe never came to see me either. It was only after I was discharged that I heard Chloe had gone abroad. Mr. Walton Sr. told me that before Chloe left, she had knelt at home for a long time. She insisted stubbornly. I should have been the one to die that day. I never found out why Chloe suddenly left that night, nor did I understand what Stella was apologizing for. In that one year, the three of us who thought we'd never be separated were torn apart by the giant wheel of fate. Stella would be forever 18. Chloe resolutely left for a foreign land, staying away for 4 years, refusing to set foot back home. I was often consumed by a sense of indebtedness that grew into guilt over time, willingly accepting the shackles of fate and finding a strange sweetness in the collapse of my own life. Right and wrong became irrelevant. Redemption became a long and arduous pilgrimage. Startled by the feeling of falling tears, I wiped away the smudges they left on the photograph over and over. I slid the photo back into the album and carefully packed it in my suitcase. It felt as if my entire past 27 years had, in the end, been reduced to nothing more than a thick photo album. Truly, nothing else remained. The gifts Chloe had given me over the years. They were displayed quietly in a glass case in the walk-in closet, their jeweled brilliance making their value incalculable. The Walton heiress, spending a fortune for a smile, made it all seem so casual, so ordinary, that it never felt like there was much genuine sentiment behind it. I leaned my violin against the case. Looking at it all, only this violin felt like it held any sincerity. From our home, I only took my own clothes. As the car pulled away and was about to turn the corner, our driver, Chris, said cautiously, "It looks like Ms. Walton is back." I glanced at the rearview mirror and saw that Chloe had returned. Her car screeched to a halt at the entrance, and she hurried inside. I looked away. Let's go. The next day, I got a call from Chloe's father. He didn't waste words. "Come to the house right now and see me." He hung up abruptly. I held the phone and let out a soft sigh. The Walton estate. All the staff had been sent away from the house, leaving an oppressive silence so complete you could hear a pin drop. I headed for the second-floor study and saw Chloe in the hallway, standing by the window at the far end. She was still in last night's clothes, the bloodstains stark and jarring against her white shirt. Both of her hands were wrapped in gauze, stained with fresh blood seeping through. Despite her grim state, she didn't look the least bit disheveled. Smoke curled from between her fingers, and her handsome face was a mask of cold numbness, like the calm after a violent storm. Hearing my footsteps, she gave me a fleeting glance before lowering her eyes again, saying nothing. I passed her in silence and pushed open the study door. The Walton family elders were all present, and their conversation stopped abruptly the moment I walked in. I greeted each of them politely, as was expected. With her grandmother, the matriarch, present, things didn't get too unpleasant. She beckoned to me. "Ethan, dear, come and tell your grandmother why you've suddenly decided on a divorce." "Grandma, it wasn't a sudden decision," I said, pouring her some warm tea as I always did, my tone gentle but firm. "You know I wouldn't bring this up lightly. Tea doesn't grow cold in an instant, and neither does a person's heart." The old woman understood perfectly well, but she still asked, unwilling to give up. "So your mind is made up?" "Yes," I said, and added, fearing she was worried about the division of assets. "And please don't worry, I don't want anything." "Oh, it's not about the money," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "Chloe has been wild these past few years, I know, but you two are childhood sweethearts and have been married for so long. I thought you'd just fight and make up and get through it. Who knew?" I found it somewhat laughable. Chloe was promiscuous, but with the status of the Walton heiress and an unparalleled mind for business to back her up, it seemed all her romantic escapades were treated as insignificant trifles. Everyone was forgiving. She was always the favored one. Chloe and I were never equals. I wasn't allowed to have feelings, not allowed to have my own emotions. Otherwise, I was the one in the wrong. Seeing my silence, she tried to smooth things over by playing the emotional card. "I've watched you grow up since you were a little boy. In the years you've been married into our family, you've been so respectful and gentle, handling everything with grace. Grandma truly can't bear to let you go." I kept my eyes downcast, my fingertips unconsciously tracing circles on my palm. The person they never seemed to cherish much in the past, now they couldn't bear to lose. "Grandma, please take care of yourself," I said, having nothing more to add. I gave a deep bow to everyone in the room and turned to leave. Just then, the door was thrown open and Chloe walked in, her face like a sheet of ice. She didn't look at me, but as we passed each other, she grabbed my wrist in a vice-like grip. She kept squeezing, as if oblivious to the pain it must be causing her own injured hands. I looked down at her hands. More blood was seeping out, soaking the gauze completely. Her words were directed at the others, but every syllable struck me to the core. "Don't waste your breath. I'm not getting a divorce." Cowed by her presence, no one spoke. The room was utterly silent. Chloe's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile, and the words that followed were chilling. "Not unless I'm dead." By the end of it all, Chloe's father was livid, his face pale with rage. He grabbed the old woman's cane and brought it down on her again and again, hard. The blows were heavy, landing with a sickening, fleshy thud. "You're the one who courts disaster, and now you're the one making life or death pronouncements. How did I ever raise such a damn brat?" I was suddenly reminded of our wedding day. It had been a similar scene. The only difference was that this time, I didn't rush over to shield her, my heart aching for her. And Chloe, she turned slightly, as if to shield me behind her. She kept her lips pressed tightly together, not crying out in pain or saying a single word to back down. Chloe is still as stubborn as ever, I thought. She hasn't changed one bit. In the end, it was Mrs. Walton who couldn't take it anymore, throwing her arms around her husband and begging him to stop. Mr. Walton, furious, said, "To spare the rod is to spoil the child. You just keep indulging her." Chloe led me away from the whole fiasco. At the door, I pulled my hand away. It was stained with her crimson blood. I wanted to say something, but decided against it. We stood in wordless silence. Chloe raised a hand to light a cigarette, but her hands were probably in too much pain, and she fumbled with the lighter, her hand shaking. I couldn't stand to watch, so I took the lighter from her and lit the cigarette between her lips. The flame touched the tip, but Chloe didn't move, just kept the cigarette hanging loosely from her lips, watching me for a long time. After a long moment, she took the cigarette from her mouth, dropped it, and ground it out with the toe of her shoe, a mocking smile on her face. "Ethan, you really don't give a damn about me, do you?" I furrowed my brow. Unbelievable. The nerve of her to play the victim. There was too much to say, and most of it was meaningless anyway. I had no desire to argue, so I just stayed silent. When I didn't respond after a long wait, Chloe seemed to deflate, her expression turning weary. She asked, seemingly out of nowhere, "Finished moving your things out?" I nodded. "I've already taken everything I'm going to take." Chloe fell silent again. For a moment, I couldn't figure out what she was thinking. Knowing full well she wasn't someone who cared about money, I still said, "Other than my own personal belongings, I didn't take anything else." Hearing this, Chloe let out a laugh that was both amused and scornful. "Is that really what you think of me?" "Not at all," I answered honestly. "I just wanted to make a clean break." Chloe must have understood what I meant. because the smile on her face slowly froze and then vanished. You took nothing. She turned her face away, a slight, self-deprecating curve to her lips that looked almost lonely. But I feel like I'm the one who has nothing left. I picked a day with good weather and bought some flowers to take to the cemetery, to visit my mother and Stella. My mother's grave was still new, but after enduring the elements, moss had already begun to grow on the headstone. It made me think that no matter how deep the bond between people, in the end, it all just becomes a series of lonely graves. Some are outside the grave, and some are in it. And so it repeats, until eventually, everything vanishes from this world. Love and hate are wiped clean. No need for resentment. No need for obsession. After standing there for a long time, I walked through the cemetery with the flowers to visit Stella. Her grave was refurbished every year. Even after 9 years, it showed no signs of age. But the girl in the photograph was forever 18. I had been here countless times, and I talked to her for hours. The girl in the photo smiled gently, as if she were really listening to my troubles, but she could no longer solve my problems or comfort my pain. I found myself wondering over and over, if Stella were still alive, what kind of life would she have led? She would have been covered in honors, had a loving husband and children, been surrounded by grandchildren, and lived a full and happy life. Someone so gentle and wonderful deserved that. But in this world, the hardest thing to understand is fate. That day Chloe asked me why I didn't fight back. What was there to fight back with? My sense of indebtedness was impossible to shake, and there was no cure for my pain. Stella, I'm going to move on now. Will you be angry with me? I asked softly. The wind blew past, but the girl in the photo remained silent, offering no answer. This was a long goodbye. I stood up and brushed the dust from my clothes. Stella, I'm leaving now. I probably won't be back. In the end, we all have to walk our own path. Before I left, I thought of Chloe and added, I'm sorry. I couldn't do as you asked and see things through to a proper end with Chloe. The weight of gratitude is heavy, but our destined connection was too shallow. The torrent of fate washed us apart. We each boarded our own ships, set adrift indefinitely, never to reach the same shore again. I stood there quietly for a long time before deciding to leave. Just as I turned around, I saw Mrs. Walton standing behind me. I froze, my feet rooted to the spot. She was carrying a box of pastries and walked to Stella's headstone, placing them down carefully. I knew I'd find you here, she said to me, her voice calm and unreadable. I nodded silently. Mrs. Walton fell silent, taking out a silk handkerchief to wipe Stella's photograph, even though I had already cleaned it and it was free of dust. After a long moment, she finally spoke. I don't know whether to call you foolish or conscientious. I looked up as Mrs. Walton gently caressed Stella's picture. My Stella was such a good girl. She would never want anyone to feel guilty because of her kindness. My heart skipped a beat. So, she knew everything. My dislike for you was never because of Stella. She straightened up, slowly folding the handkerchief. That child, Chloe, has been wild and headstrong since she was little, never confiding in us. I thought she was forced to marry you and was unhappy, and that's why she acted so recklessly. As a mother, I don't want my child to be in an unhappy marriage, which is why I was often so hard on you. I know, I said sincerely. I never blamed you. She started walking down the hill, and I followed quietly behind her. It was my fault for not understanding my own daughter. It's not that she doesn't like you. She likes you too much, Mrs. Walton said, a hint of guilt in her voice. I thought back to when we were young. It seems everyone prefers the more accomplished child, and even a family like the Waltons was no exception. Stella and Chloe were twins, so their family's love had to be split in two. And where there is love, there is always favoritism. Stella's brilliance captured the family's entire attention, while Chloe, mischievous and loud, was seen as unlikable and was naturally overlooked. And Chloe, with her rebellious nature, only grew more defiant and untamable over time. After Stella passed away, Chloe seemed to turn over a new leaf, shouldering all of the family's expectations. Aside from her recklessness in relationships, it was hard to find fault with her in any other area. Mr. Walton Sr. had said that Chloe believed she was the one who should have died that day. She must have carried an immense weight of guilt over Stella. Mrs. Walton sighed. That time I slapped you. She was so furious she flew to Africa to hunt wild game just to blow off steam. Only then did I realize how foolish that child can be. I thought about those pictures of her and Leo, and it became hard to tell what was real and what wasn't anymore. It seemed everything was just a tangled, impossible knot. Mrs. Walton seemed to read my mind. More than anyone, she wanted you to let go of that baseless guilt. She probably thought you were in love with Stella, so she chose the most foolish way to constantly act out. She couldn't help but sigh. On one hand, she was trying to push you to fight back and free yourself, and on the other, she was like a child throwing a tantrum because she couldn't get a piece of candy, just wanting you to look at her, acting out until finally. At this point, this proud, noble woman actually made a request. Ethan, as a man yourself, I know you understand that some things can't be undone. She paused, putting on her sunglasses before continuing. But as a mother, I hope you two can part on good terms. That child is stubborn. Don't let her back herself into a corner. I could hear the sob in her voice, and my own heart ached in response. After she left, I walked along the mountain path for a very long time. I thought about many things, and I thought about Stella. Stella always used to say, Ethan, Chloe is just a big kid. I think she was right. Chloe had been like that since she was a child, saying one thing and meaning another, awkward and proud. Too proud and too stubborn. I thought to myself, if there is grace in love, then there should also be grace in having loved. When I went back to our place to find Chloe, she was sitting in my walk-in closet. She was putting back together, one by one, the things she had smashed earlier. I don't know where I heard it, but they say the most helpless thing a person can do is smash things in a fit of rage, and then, after calming down, painstakingly put every broken piece back together. Chloe looked up at me for a moment, then looked down again, continuing her work in silence. The gauze on her hands was a mess of blood and dirt, but she acted as if she couldn't feel the pain, lost in some stubborn task. I didn't say anything, just went downstairs to get the first aid kit. When I came back and sat in front of her, she struggled a little as I reached for her hands. See, still so proud, even now. Even though I had prepared myself, my heart still lurched when I unwrapped the gauze from her hands. Doesn't that hurt? Chloe turned her face away from me and scoffed. I thought you didn't care whether I lived or died. I couldn't help but laugh in exasperation. Chloe, you're being so unreasonable. When she heard me laugh, she turned back to look at me, her expression complicated. In all these years, it feels like we've never once had a proper conversation, I said with a sad smile as I carefully cleaned her wounds. From our youth through our marriage, we were always so close yet so far, entangled yet distant. It was our personalities. It was a trick of fate. We were like two crashing planes on a path to destruction, doomed beyond any hope of recovery. Chloe's silence was a form of agreement. I continued tending to her hands, my voice calm and steady. Chloe, when I married you, it was for the alliance. It was out of a sense of debt, but more than anything, it was out of love. Chloe snatched her hand back violently, her reaction huge, clearly in disbelief. Don't move, I said, pulling her hand back and offering a small smile. Have you forgotten? That year in London, you were the one who told me not to be greedy. When she said that, I fell silent. My love was impossible to put into words, leaving me feeling helpless and heartbroken. Chloe started to explain, but her voice failed her. I know, you don't mean what you say, I said, gently wiping away the fresh blood beating on her wound. But back then, I was genuinely hurt. Chloe never seemed to understand that saying one thing and meaning another is different from actually hurting someone with your words. Then didn't you go straight to your father the moment you got back and tell him you wouldn't marry me? Chloe ground her teeth, still angry. You said it so easily. What was I supposed to think? I almost had to laugh. Have you forgotten about Leo? She actually had forgotten. She raised an eyebrow. I never took him seriously. He used to follow our racing team around, but I never saw him after I came back to the States. That time in Africa, I have no idea how he knew I was there, and after that. What happened after that? She did on purpose. When I first saw Leo in London, I thought Chloe liked him. I was heartbroken, thinking that if she really had someone she loved, then forcing her to be with me would make for a miserable marriage. She wouldn't be happy, and I couldn't bear that. So I went to my father and asked to call off the engagement. I got a beating for it. It's almost funny, thinking about it now. I actually laughed out loud. I was really upset at first, but eventually, I truly stopped caring. The defiant spark in Chloe's eyes slowly faded. My movements were gentle, and my voice was soft, even tinged with a smile. Over these years, my love for you has been a constant process of subtraction. Every reckless thing you did, my love for you diminished a little more, until finally, there was nothing left. Chloe grabbed my hand, her own turning white at the knuckles, her lips pale. Her throat was dry, and she couldn't form a complete sentence. I gently pulled her hand away and continued to treat her wounds. You know that no matter what your reasons were, it doesn't erase the pain you caused me. For years, she childishly and stubbornly tormented me, hurting me again and again. All those little things were enough to break a person's heart. It was only after countless nights with red-rimmed eyes, countless nights of heartache that kept me awake, that I finally learned to let go. Chloe, you ask what love is. I don't know how to answer you. Should I start from when I was 17, knocking on your window? Or the nearly 100 plane tickets I bought for flights to and from London over those 4 years because I missed you so much? Or maybe from the time you said you missed my mom's chicken noodle soup, and I spent weeks learning how to make it perfectly before flying across the country just to make you a bowl? Or should I start with all the times these past few years I've had to drag you out of some bar, my own eyes red from worry? There's too much. I don't even know where to begin. I never said I loved her, but I showed it in a million different ways. She just chose to ignore it all. Chloe turned her head away, not daring to look at me, but her fingertips were trembling. I smiled forgivingly. I know you don't want to hear any of this, because you already know it all. How could Chloe not have felt my love? She just stubbornly believed that I did it all just to become Mr. Walton. All these years, she kept asking me if I was tired of putting on an act. How was I supposed to prove to her that none of it was an act? She seemed to forget that even if I had done nothing, her grandfather would have made us get married anyway. That marriage contract was a promise he made to my grandfather. Thinking about it now, maybe that contract was a curse from the very beginning. Chloe and I were bound together. No matter what either of us did, it seemed natural to question whether it was out of duty or genuine affection. Maybe I was at fault too. Over the years, the constraints of my own family, my mother's long illness, and my debt to Stella all left me emotionally and physically drained. As Chloe kept pushing, I grew rebellious myself. Kind, yet distant. Chloe wouldn't look at me, tilting her head back, the corners of her eyes turning red. Ethan, you have to believe me. I've never loved anyone else. We haven't been apart for more than 20 years, and we won't be in the future either. She was so arrogantly confident, relying on our childhood bond, on the marriage alliance she saw as a cage, on my tolerance and kindness. She seemed to have forgotten that Ethan Miller is a person. His heart isn't made of steel and concrete. It can hurt, and more than once. He's wanted it to just stop beating. But I'm letting you go now, I said gently, tying the final knot on the gauze. As I started to stand up, Chloe suddenly threw her arms around me, burying her face in the crook of my neck. I felt something cold and wet on my skin, and the sound that reached my ears was muffled and broken. No matter what I do, you're still going to leave, aren't you? I told her softly. Chloe, I want to be Ethan Miller again. The world is so much bigger than I ever knew. Why be trapped by the past, a prisoner of my own making? Chloe always wanted me to break free from my cage. She just never expected that when the day finally came, I would leave her behind too. She let her hands fall to her sides, her head bowed, still refusing to let me see her eyes. Okay, she said, her eyelashes fluttering, her voice hoarse. You were always meant to be Ethan Miller. I knew. This time, she wouldn't cause any more trouble. On the first day of autumn, Chloe called. We agreed to meet at City Hall. Chloe showed up late, just as they were about to close for the day. I hadn't seen her in almost 3 months, and there was a subtle change about her. When she raised an eyebrow, she still had that same old playful arrogance, but her narrow eyes held a new, quiet reserve. She drawled, a lazy smile on her lips. You've lost weight. Her eyes were incredibly sharp. I'd only lost a few pounds, but she noticed with just a single glance. They're about to close, I reminded her. In such a hurry? Yes. Chloe lowered her gaze and cut the small talk. As the clerk was about to stamp our marriage certificate void, Chloe turned, half shielding me with her body. It was a gesture that almost looked like an embrace, but she was careful not to actually touch me. The scene felt familiar, and I couldn't help but remember the day we got our marriage license. Back then, we had both just graduated from college. It was her grandfather who personally took us to get it. Chloe was reluctant, and as we got in the car, she warned me, Ethan, you'd better be sure about this. Don't regret it. I didn't say anything, just nodded without hesitation. When it was time to take the photo for the license, I was so nervous my palms were sweating and my expression was completely stiff. We had to take it several times, but the photographer still wasn't happy. Chloe's fingers toyed with the ends of my hair. This nervous? Just as the shutter clicked, she playfully wrapped an arm around my waist and whispered, Smile, honey. My body went rigid, and my face instantly flushed red. The photographer was thrilled. There we go. Now that's what a groom should look like. That was the photo that ended up on our marriage certificate. Chloe, with one eyebrow slightly raised in a smirk, and me, leaning lightly against her shoulder, looking shy, my eyes shining. Anyone looking at it would never think Chloe was being forced. We looked like any other deeply in love newlywed couple. And now, as we were getting our divorce papers, Chloe recreated that very moment. That roguish whisper tickled my ear again. Honey. I scowled. The stamp isn't down yet, so I'm not wrong, am I? Chloe shrugged innocently. The stamp came down with a thud. Chloe sat up straight, took the 2 booklets, one red and one green, and stuffed them into her hand without a glance. Outside City Hall, Chloe suggested, "Want to get some farewell dinner?" I checked my watch. I had time. My treat. Works for me. I treated you when we got married. You can treat me now that we're divorced. I led her through a small alleyway to a little place with a narrow storefront. Low, old wooden tables and red plastic stools. Have a seat. Chloe remained standing. Are you really this cheap now? I reminded her. You're the one who brought me here the day we got our license. I've always been one for bringing things full circle. Chloe scratched her eyebrow. I guess I did. She relented and sat down. The table was too low for her tall frame, and she had nowhere to put her long legs. She had to stretch them out under the table. Under the small table, her long legs felt impossibly invasive, the cuff of her pants brushing against my ankle. I pulled my foot back, starting to regret bringing her here. The owner, a friendly woman, greeted us warmly. I haven't seen you two in here together for a long time. It's been a few years, I nodded. The day we got our marriage license, Chloe had said, Honey, shouldn't we get a meal to celebrate? The word, honey, rolled off her tongue in that casual way of hers, making it impossible to tell if she was serious or not. She was the one who brought me here. The owner saw the red marriage certificate on the table and congratulated us profusely. Chloe's expression was neutral, but there was a definite hint of a smile in her eyes. When she paid, she left a generous tip. A faint smile played on her lips. Consider it a celebration. You two have been married for a few years now, right? Any kids yet? The owner asked, a little too enthusiastically. Chloe just smiled playfully and said nothing. I answered truthfully. We just got divorced. Oh. The owner was visibly shocked and stood there stunned for a moment. Not daring to press further, she changed the subject. The usual for you two? Yes. After the owner walked away, Chloe asked, You've been here by yourself? No. I answered without even thinking. In truth, I had. But I didn't want to admit how pathetic I'd been during our marriage. Whenever the tabloids were full of Chloe's latest scandal, I'd feel lost, not knowing where to go, and I'd always end up thinking about our wedding day. And somehow, coming here became a habit. When I was sad, I'd sit here, head down, eating a bowl of steaming noodles. I could pretend my tears were just from the steam. Liar, Chloe said, her long fingers tapping on the edge of the table. You came here a lot during our marriage. How did you know? Chloe gave a non-committal smile and didn't answer. I didn't press the issue. Not every question has an answer, and not every question needs one. Chloe and I fell into the latter category. Leaving the little restaurant, we walked back out through the narrow, winding alleyway. Chloe said suddenly, They're going to tear this place down soon. There was a hint of regret in her voice. I remembered then that this place meant even more to Chloe than it did to me. She first brought me here in high school. We ate 2 bowls of noodles, and while the owner was busy, she'd drop some money on the table and we'd leave. A thick wad of cash. Are you crazy? Why are you leaving so much money for 2 bowls of noodles? I asked, completely baffled. Chloe covered my mouth and half dragged, half carried me away. It was only then that I learned the owner had a child with ALS and was constantly in and out of hospitals. We started going there often after that, always leaving money and running off. One time, the owner chased us for several blocks with the money. I think my love for Chloe wasn't just because I yearned for freedom and wanted to chase that wild wind. It was also because, beneath all her wild arrogance, she was a stubborn tomboy with a soft heart. You're not still hoping the owner will pay you back, are you? I teased, trying to lighten the mood. Chloe shot me a look of disdain. Only you would think of something like that. We ribbed each other the whole way, dredging up embarrassing stories from our youth and mercilessly making fun of each other. As we were talking, Chloe joked, If I'd known we could get along this well after a divorce, I would have dragged you down to City Hall years ago. I looked down at the stone path beneath my feet and just smiled, not saying anything. When we reached the end of the alley, Chloe got the carefully wrapped violin out of her car. Fearing I might refuse, Chloe said with a roguish grin, I accepted your gifts, so you have no reason to refuse mine, right? She was right. Never mind the divorce papers. She'd even taken the certificate itself. I reached out and took it. Thank you. Don't mention it, Chloe said, scratching her eyebrow. I remember when you were 15, you said you wanted to take your violin and perform on the world's biggest stages. You remember that, I said with a smile. Young and full of ambition, unafraid of any obstacle, determined to make my dreams shine as brightly as the moon. It was only later that I realized the world is littered with the shattered pieces of dreams. Chloe lit a cigarette and looked at me. I remember everything you've ever said. I pretended not to understand her implication. You've always had a good memory, Miss Walton. Of course, Chloe said, playing along with a proud lift of her eyebrow. For a moment, it felt like we were teenagers again. Chloe stood with her arms crossed, a cigarette between her fingers, not speaking for a long time. I noticed the faint, crisscrossing scars on her left hand, and saw that she was still wearing her wedding ring on her long, slender ring finger. Noticing my gaze, Chloe turned her hand over to look at it. Oh, the ring. I really hadn't meant to stare. But just that one glance was enough for her to notice. I didn't know what to say, so I just kept quiet. Chloe took a drag from her cigarette, her eyes focused. I promised I'd give you your freedom, but I never promised I wouldn't try to win you back. Knowing it was impossible, I just smiled. You won't succeed. Chloe took a deep drag of her cigarette, the white smoke curling up into the night air. She said, with her usual mix of arrogance and nonchalance, Ethan, as long as I'm in the picture, no one else will dare to step up. And she was right. Chloe had every reason to be arrogant. Just then, Chris's call came through, and I turned away to answer it, using it as an excuse to change the subject. I'm here, his voice said through the phone, and at the same time, I saw a car flash its hazard lights down the street. I see you. I put my phone back in my bag and turned to Chloe. I have to go. The wisps of smoke blurred her outline as she gave a slight nod. I wanted to say goodbye, but then I thought better of it. So, in my heart, I silently said, take care, Chloe. Chris couldn't wait for long, so I jogged over, holding the violin case. As the car drove away, Chloe was still standing there, one cigarette finished, lighting another. I looked away and slowly closed my eyes. That night, I boarded a plane to a faraway place. During the long flight, on a whim, I opened the violin case. I was surprised to find something else inside besides the violin. A credit card, and a small good luck charm from a church. There was no pin with the card. I could probably guess it, but I knew I would never use it. I picked up the charm and looked at it. It was inscribed with 4 words, peace and prosperity. On the back, 2 lines of tiny words were engraved. Ethan Miller, Chloe Walton. I looked at it in silence for a moment before putting it, along with the card, into my carry-on bag. That night, thousands of feet in the air, I had a dream. In my dream, I was on that familiar, tree-lined path, still long and quiet. The setting sun filtered through the treetops, casting dappled shadows, and at the end of the road was a sea of orange light. A young Stella wore her backpack neatly, while a young Chloe had hers slung carelessly over one shoulder. I ran after their retreating figures, shouting, "Wait for me." Stella turned around with a gentle smile. "Ethan, slow down. I'll wait for you." Chloe didn't even look back. When I caught up to her, she frowned in annoyance. "What's the rush? You in a hurry to die or something?" I complained to Stella, feeling wronged. "Stella, she's picking on me again. Don't mind her. She's just a big kid." I made a triumphant face at Chloe. Chloe's frown deepened. "Ethan, you're such an idiot." She reached out to pull my hair, and I took off running, with her chasing right behind me. Stella fell far behind, watching us with a smile. It turns out that even the bonds of youth don't always last a lifetime. This journey would take me thousands of miles away. There would be no reunion. And so, Chloe, don't frown. Don't worry. Everything will eventually pass. Epilogue. Chloe knew, actually. That day, at the mouth of the alley, was the last time she would ever see Ethan. He wasn't coming back. Chloe left her car and walked alone down the long, dark street. She thought about many things. When she was very little, an adult had pointed to a handsome little boy and teased her. "That's your future husband." From childhood on, her name and Ethan's had been bound together, their fate sealed long ago. And she had known from very early on that she loved Ethan. It was a love that was approved by everyone, open and celebrated, showered with blessings. Childhood sweethearts, innocent and pure, a perfect, happy ending. That was the life she had wanted to give Ethan. But how had things ended up like this? Chloe thought maybe it started with that trip after their SATs, when Ethan got drunk and Stella carefully kissed his cheek. Or maybe it was after Stella died, when she was going through her sister's belongings and found her diary, filled with pages and pages about her silent love. Chloe would regret for the rest of her life leaving in a huff that night. If she hadn't left, she would have been the one buried in the rubble with Ethan. She would have been the one to die, not Stella. And Ethan wouldn't have had to live with that sense of indebtedness to Stella. Chloe thought that maybe Ethan's indebtedness was mixed with love, which was why it was so heavy. When she was a girl, Chloe would sometimes hear the adults joking. They'd say, "You know, Ethan and Stella's personalities seem more suited for each other." And they'd lament, "Yes, if only Ethan had chosen Stella from the start." In Chloe's heart, A wound formed and scarred over. She thought to herself that the living could never compete with the dead, especially when that person was her own sister. Chloe always had this obsession. Her Ethan was supposed to be that proud, slightly pampered boy with a bright, charming smile. He was also supposed to be that genius violinist, standing on stage with his violin, glowing. A storm was brewing. She could feel it. So Chloe, childishly, chose the most direct and shallow method. She feigned promiscuity, a clumsy, transparent act, moving from one affair to another, to test him, to push him, to test if he had any real feelings for her, to force him to throw off the shackles of fate, to let go of his guilt and his lingering feelings for Stella. She was too close to see clearly, and those on the outside were too afraid to speak up. And so she walked further and further down this reckless path, and it seemed to have worked. Ethan was finally free, and he had finally let her go. The night was deep on the long street, and Chloe felt a sting in her eyes. The wind blew, and she felt tears welling up. She walked for a long, long time, as if she were trying to walk through her entire life in one night. She knew Ethan wasn't coming back, and she would never find him again. And then Chloe remembered. One time, during those 4 years in London, Ethan had come to see her. The boy who had never done anything rebellious in his life put on a leather jacket and got on the back of her motorcycle. She had deliberately tried to scare him. "You sure about this? It won't be a pretty sight if you fall off and die." He was always so vain. But that day, the boy had held onto her waist tightly and said, "Dying with you wouldn't be so bad." And Chloe thought, what a strange boy. He could die with her, but he couldn't bear to live with her.